Welcome to Chasing Fi. Today I thought we'd do a little something fun here. I want to go through and do like an autopsy on my career in education. Now, on September 20th, I will bring that career to an end and I'm going to hang up that red pin. So, while I'm in these last few weeks, I've been thinking back on my teaching career and just my career in education because it's something that I've been around for a lot longer than just the years that I spent in the classroom. It was something that I was always passionate about. I love to learn. I love school. And also, my mom was a teacher. My father's mother and his aunts, they were all teachers. Like, it's something that I was very passionate about. And I wanted to do it because my mom was one of the few people I knew when I was growing up that absolutely loved her job. Like, she loved it so much. In fact, she would have probably taught until her death if there hadn't become a movement to get teachers with seniority out of their positions. So, in about, I think, like 2007 ish, Detroit Public Schools started to make these teachers who were seasoned and made a lot more money than the new teachers, they started to make them interview for their jobs every year. And eventually, my mom just said, if I have to go through this every year, forget it. And she ended up retiring early. Well, not really early, but she had all her years in, so she just thought, okay, I'll retire. But I think that she would have kept teaching if she hadn't had to do that. If they weren't trying to force out seasoned teachers so that they could bring in new teachers and really kind of rip them off. So that's what we're going to look at today. First, let's talk a little bit about my credentials when I decided to go into teaching. So I have a master's degree, bachelor's degree. I also spent 5 years as a literacy tutor. I taught 1 year of summer school. I was a culinary trainer from the end of high school on. I also had 1 year teaching in an after school program with my mom. After I completed graduate school, I went back to get my teaching certificate. I was one class away. But when I was an undergrad, there was a time when I was an education major, I just hated the classes. I hated the labeling. I hated this idea that you could tell people exactly how they should teach students that they hadn't met yet. I thought that was ridiculous. So I ended up switching my major before I completed it. But I had done what they used to call pre-student teaching, no idea what they call it now, where I actually went in and taught in a middle school class for a semester, a kindergarten class for a semester, and then at one time I was a special education major, so I also did what they used to call emotionally impaired class. So I taught in one of those too. So I had some experience and, like it wasn't like I just walked into, a classroom and was like, oh, I just want to teach. So I had some experience. I had trouble finding a job because it turns out that education is one of those places where they don't want you to have a master's because they have to pay you like, I don't know. I know around here it's like $1,000 more than they would a teacher that doesn't have a master's. So it was kind of hard for me to find a job, but I found a temporary position as a permanent sub and teaching assistant at this residential treatment center. So I went to work there. This was 2011. I worked there for 3 months. I absolutely loved it. It was, it was a psychiatric treatment center, but this was the best teaching job that I had. I loved it. And the lady that I was filling in for, she had left to have a baby and she didn't really want to come back. But financially, she needed to come back. So at the last minute, she said, sorry, I'm going to have to come back because I'd already been talking with the principal. I was going to become their full-time permanent sub. And eventually, when a position opened up, I was going to get, I was going to move into a full-time teaching position. I was so excited. So I was brokenhearted when that position was gone. I literally went into like a depression because I loved that job. The teaching assistant position paid $18 an hour, 40 hours a week. It was a year-round school, but the work was completed at work. No nights or weekends. You never took anything home. Now, there was some drawbacks. Obviously, if it's year-round, you don't get extra time off for holidays. You're lucky if you get like Memorial Day or Labor Day off or something like that. You get Christmas Eve, maybe New Year's Day, but you're working. If those holidays fall on a weekday, you're working all around those holidays. But I did not care about that because I loved my boss, loved my coworkers, loved the kids I worked with. The work-life balance was awesome. And they gave you a 2% raise every year. So I was super excited in May of the next year when I got a text message from my old boss asking if I wanted to come back and be their full-time permanent sub and teaching assistant. Of course I did. I was over the moon. I went back. I worked in that position for 2 years. And then in 2014, I got my dream job. My dream job was getting a classroom and teaching full time at this residential treatment center. I absolutely loved it. It was great, but this is where the red tape of education comes in. So, the Utah State Board of Education, or whatever they're calling themselves these days, they have these alternative routes to teacher licensure programs. So, I was in one that really, it was ridiculous. The classes that they wanted you to take, they weren't expensive. They were, online and things like that. But the people that were teaching them, some of them, they knew less about teaching than I did and other students did. And, like the people I was in the classes with, we would talk about, we were like, that class is kind of a joke. It seemed like it was just kind of like a way for teachers to make a little extra cash if they were in good with the Utah Board of Education. It was like ridiculous. So it's just taking more time from you that you don't need to give up. But the Utah State Board of Education said that I could not get my teaching license there, even though I had all this experience and everything. They said, you can't be in our program if you're teaching at a residential treatment center because we don't know what type of school is that. Really what this was just control by Utah. It's not a public school. The residential treatment center was a private school. So they really, they're like, oh, we don't know what type of teaching goes on there. So I invited them in. They did not come. And then they told me that I would have to go through a teacher preparation program at a university. And I said, you know what? There's absolutely no way I'm going back to college for anything, for anybody. So because I was not going to be able to get my teaching license and stay there, well, actually I had the temporary teaching license. I wasn't going to be able to get a full teaching license and stay there. Then I had to leave. And I was broken hearted. And I should have taken it as a sign to leave education behind then. But at this point, I was like, I really like teaching. I want to do this. I want to do this. Well, that was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. I probably should have just called up Red Lobster where I was waiting tables and been like, hey, can I get back on the schedule? But I had actually moved for this job. So I lived far away from, where I used to wait tables and everything. And I was like, well, this is Utah. There's plenty of teaching jobs. Also, I was able to get a part-time adjunct position. It paid $3,000 for a 12-week class. I was teaching literature, English comp, things like that. But it's adjunct, so sporadic schedule. And so I took that. And then I found a job at a public charter, a virtual public charter. So sadly, I had to leave my dream teaching job. And this public charter virtual school that I went to, immediately there's a $12,000 pay cut. And so the starting pay was $28,000 a year. I don't know if I said that my dream job started off at $40,000. So I was pretty excited about that. But the virtual teacher position starts out at $28,000. It's a public charter. So Utah says, oh yeah, you can do our program there. No problem. Which is ironic because at this school, literally I taught 30 minutes a day, if that. And that was 4 days a week. Friday, we didn't have school for the kids. So all of this was administrative work that you were doing at this school. It was an 8 to 5, Monday through Friday schedule. You didn't get summers off. You might be able to get some time off in July if you finished your curriculum map, because each year the administration wanted to completely change whatever you taught the previous year. They wanted to completely change it. You also had to do marketing for the school. When state testing came up, you had to go and pick up laptops in these huge cases and lug them out to a testing site because it was a virtual school. So you had to have the kids all in one place and you had to monitor the testing. This was a nightmare for me, an absolute nightmare. I, at the time, lived in a place called West Jordan, And I had to go down to Murray, where the school's office was at, pick up these heavy cases of laptops. So I want you to imagine a huge case with 10 laptops in it. So there was, like some guy helped me get them in the car, but these are all laptops, right? And I've got all these laptops in my car. Do I want to leave them in there overnight? Because I got to be at the testing site early in the morning. I don't. But can I really bring all of these into my apartment and lug them back out in the morning? They're really heavy. But I did that because I was afraid that, if somebody saw a big case in the back seat of my car, they were going to break into it. So then the next morning, I had to get up, take the laptops with me out to Tooele and set up the testing site. Well, the internet didn't work. I had to find out how to get in touch with their IT people because they weren't on site. It was a total nightmare, but those were the types of things that we were expected to do. We also ran field trips, so you had to like plan it. And I always had Tooele. I don't know why. It it wasn't close to my house, but fine, whatever. I had it. The second year I had it. Even after being told, you know what, you paid your dues going out there. We're going to have somebody else do it the next year. Well, nobody wanted to do it. So it just ended up on me. It was really crazy. This was an extremely stressful job. I was getting poorer, as you can see, with a $12,000 pay cut. I mean, like, it was turning into a nightmare. And so your daily duties were you were on the phone calling parents and students, trying to track down your students that never came to class. On a good day, you would have 70 students in your virtual class, but about 200 were enrolled. So those that didn't show up, you needed to place calls and you needed to send emails and you needed to try and get in touch with them. And at one point they were like, are you guys comfortable going to their houses and seeing why these kids aren't coming to school? And I was like, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know what I'm walking into, but that's the way that job was going. So after 2 years there, I just could not take it anymore. I went, found a job, full-time fifth grade teacher at a parochial school. I went to parochial school as a kid. I absolutely loved it. And this was a good job. It only, like the starting pay was $30,000, but remember, the previous job was making $28,000, so this was an increase. And I loved the kids. I loved the coworkers. I probably would have taught there for a while, but I ended up meeting my husband and moving across the state. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to, drive down there. It's like on a good day, about 50 minutes away. And for $30,000, yeah, no. So the work-life balance was better at this job. I still graded and planned lessons in the evenings and on Saturday mornings, but it wasn't as much because I had smaller classes. Like, my classes were smaller. The only problem I really had there is that I got into an argument with the priest. We were teaching a religious ed class together, only he wasn't teaching. He was just kind of hanging out. And I confronted him about it, and he stopped teaching the class with me, which increased my workload. Like, he did half the week, I did the other half of the week. And after I confronted him, he said, I'm not doing it anymore. So I ended up doing the entire week. So that took away a planning session. But, I probably would have continued to teach at that school because he was moved after that. But I moved away, so I couldn't. The next job was as a part-time advanced placement teacher, senior English teacher, freshman English. So this was a military-themed public charter, which I thought would be really great for me because I don't know. I like order. I like things, I like respect. I like teaching values that the military would be instilling in students. So I thought it'd be great. So initially, the starting pay was $18 an hour. When I went in to fill out all my paperwork, the director of human resources, he said, hey, the CEO told me that you're not supposed to clock in. You're going to be a salaried employee. And I was like, oh, cool. So at this point, I was pretty excited because I thought, wow, I'm finally getting paid for my master's degree because I was going to make $36,000 a year. And I was like, cool, this is pretty cool. And I didn't mind that job. I was happy with, even though I didn't have a classroom and all that stuff. So I had to like drag a cart around the school. make sure I had everything packed up. I had to share a classroom with a teacher who I got along with her, so that was fine. But, it was kind of awkward sitting in the back of her class while she was teaching and all that. But whatever, it was okay. I thought I can do this for $36,000 a year. I worked Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes I'd go in if I needed to do planning and things like that. Well, the following March, I was pulled into the principal's office and it was contract time. And he was like, "Hey, we really want you to come back next year." I was like, "Oh, great. This is a good fit for me." And then he said, "But if you do come back, you got to know that we made a mistake. We weren't supposed to be paying you $36,000 a year. That's the starting salary for full-time teachers here." And I'm like, "Oh." So then they said, "We'll pay you $18,000 a year." Now, I did keep that job because my husband and I, we weren't planning on me teaching forever anyway. And, we don't live off of anything that I make because I've never made much. So normally what we do with my salary, like obviously I've been put it to where my student loan and stuff like that, but we also would save it, like it helped us buy rentals, things like that. So he was like, "If you like the job, I mean, just stick with it. But of course, the pattern with education is that as soon as you're like, "Okay, I'll deal with some of the unpleasantries of this job," the job becomes much, much more unpleasant. So the second year that I taught there, so this is the year I'm making $18,000 a year. And the second year ends up starting off really poorly because everything that we did the previous year, we were told we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do crazy things like, as an English teacher, you're going to have your students write a paper a week because they don't have good reading and writing skills. So what makes a kid hate reading and writing more than anything? Making them write a paper every week. This was a terrible plan. And none of the English teachers had been consulted. It was just something that we were told that we had to do. So basically, everything that we'd done the year before, we needed to throw that out and do what the administration wanted us to do. Also, the second year, I still didn't have a classroom, and I was teaching in classrooms of teachers that it was uncomfortable teaching in their classrooms. The first year, I taught in classrooms there was one teacher who was very strange, very, territorial or whatever. And I'm like, "I don't want to be in here, okay?" I have to be. But the second year, there was a teacher who was like a neat freak, super clean, all this stuff. And you know what? Actually, ninth grade boys aren't that super clean. So she expected me to clean her classroom after I was done with it. And then my department head had some issues with boundaries, just really bad boundaries, in my opinion, with students and other teachers. While I was trying to teach my classes, the students were, her friends were coming in and, gossiping with her. And, somebody broke up with a boy or something. And they're like, "Oh, I need your ear." Things like that. It was really strange. It was like the department head was like she was in high school too. She was all wrapped up in the drama there. And sometimes in the middle of my class, there were kids walking in and out who were coming to talk to her about whatever drama they had going on in their life. So it's really uncomfortable. I ended up quitting mid-year. And after that, I took a job at a virtual university as a teaching assistant. Now, the reason I took this job is because my husband and I, we want to start a family and everything like that. I wasn't planning on working outside of the home for a long time. I wanted to be home. And so this seemed like the perfect job. Once again, it's only paying $15 an hour, whatever. It wasn't super hard. I really liked the professor I was working under. And initially, it was just regular teaching duties, okay? Well, over time, it escalated to the teaching assistants pretty much became the professors, but we were still making like $15 an hour. So it was like they wanted us to teach the classes. They wanted us to email the students. They wanted us to do everything that you would do as a professor, but they wanted to keep us at $15 an hour. Well, I shouldn't say that. I now make $16.11, but obviously a lot less than you would expect a professor to make. So the original instructor I worked with, she quit. And after she left, I was like, this place is it's going downhill. She had worked for them for a very long time. And she didn't tell us that, the ship is sinking, but you could tell, like, she loved that place. initially, and you could just tell it was going downhill. They were asking too much. They were expecting things that didn't make sense. And then over the past year or so, well, past 2 years, it's become increasingly political there. And I'm just not into that. I don't want a job where you're telling me what my politics should be. So, and that seems to be becoming widespread in education. I don't want that. In fact, I don't really like the idea that you need to tell your students a lot about you, because it's not supposed to be about you. It's supposed to be about you sharing information with them, and then they get to learn and grow from it. It's not about, hey, here's what I do in my life. Here's what I believe, and you should believe it too. Like, I'm not into indoctrination. I'm not into that. So, really uncomfortable levels of you interjecting yourself into the education process and making it more about you than what is being taught or what the students are supposed to learn. I'm not into that. So I am leaving education behind for good this time. No working in the education field as a teaching assistant or anything like that. I want nothing else to do with that. The reason I'm getting out of education is because of the money. The money is very poor. So I took a look at what I made during my teaching career. So we got to 2012. I made $34,668. Now that is having 3 jobs: adjunct professor, teaching assistant half the year, and a waitress. In 2013, I made $43,187, and that was being a teaching assistant and an adjunct professor. In 2014, my best year, I spent 4 months as a teaching assistant, 4 months in my dream job position, virtual teaching position, second half of the year, and an adjunct professor. All of that, and I made $52,511. Then in 2015, I made $42,463. I was a middle school teacher and an adjunct professor. In 2016, I made $40,621. I was a parochial school teacher and an adjunct professor. In 2017, I made $34,756. And that was the year where the school told me they had overpaid me. In 2018, I made $31,134 because there's still, half the year where I got the pay from, the mistake year. And then in 2019, I made $17,922. And that was just me being a teaching assistant. And then in 2020, I made $18,445. That was teaching assistant. And then last year, I made $29,007. And that was being a teaching assistant and a writer. I actually, because my writing is a business, I had a lot more revenue than that. But obviously, you subtract your revenue, from your business expenses. So I guess that just gave me a boost of confidence to say, hey, you know what? You can go on your own and make more money than you're ever going to make as a teacher. If you spent the amount of time that you spent on your books, on your rentals that you spend working in education, you're going to blow those old salaries out of the water. So that is why I am leaving education for good. And that, my friends, is an autopsy of my brief, sometimes okay, career in education. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.